Good morning once again to everyone being connected to the webinar. We'll be getting started shortly. Looking at the time, it is ready to get started. So thank you again for joining the COVID-19 WARN webinar. We are in week number 7. So we do thank you for joining us. Before I turn it over to our speakers, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items as we do every week. During the call, if you are connected via Zoom, you are going to have 2 opportunities for engaging with our panelists and guest speakers. The first option is the chat box, and the second is Q&A. Please feel free to go and open those items now if you wish, so that way you can interact with everyone. We will not be able to allow anyone else to speak on the presentation, so when you raise your hand, I am not able to unmute your line and get you access to speak. We do ask that you type in your questions via chat or question and answer. Inside the chat box, if you wish to have your comments or your questions available to everyone to see, we just simply ask that you change the "to" to be all panelists and attendees. So this will make your information that you're sharing or the question you're asking available to everyone watching the webinar today, and we can engage in some background communications while the panelists are speaking. To do that, simply click on the "to" button. A drop-down will come open, and you select all panelists and attendees. For question and answer, please just open the Q&A box, type your question there in the center, and then click send in the lower right corner. Our panelists and our guests will see this, and we will get to your question as soon as we can. Also, we are streaming through YouTube Live. If you're viewing with us from that platform, welcome. There's a chat box that's located on the right-hand side, and I do monitor that throughout the discussions. So feel free to chat your information in there, and we will communicate it into the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, so please note that what we say here will be available after the webinar is over. If you need to come back and refer back to it or share it with a colleague that maybe was not able to join, you can find that link on our vawarn.org website, along with a lot of other information. So you're welcome to go there. You'll see every week's webinar that we've held so far, and this will also be added at the end of the day. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start the recording, and I'd like to turn it over to our presenters.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're pleased to have you here with us for week 7 of our COVID-19 WARN update. We've got some really good speakers on today. We're going to try and get a good message out to everybody. I want to welcome everybody that's joining us, whether you're from a state agency, VDH, DEQ, DPOR, any other state agencies that may be on the line, our WARN members that continue to support this and help us get the message out to our utilities, the Virginia utilities who this information is really designed for to help you make the best decisions and use best business practices as we share it across the Commonwealth. And then any additional Virginia partners that may be listening in that may want to have a stronger role with the WARN, whether you're a consultant or you're a supply person or maybe somebody that's working in the field with us. We want to thank you for listening in. This should be a great opportunity for everyone. Next slide. All right, so as we always start out with our situational reports. So currently, we're going to go over some slides that talk about the current state of the pandemic here in Virginia. We have some agency updates. So from VDH, they're kind of wanting to know what's going on with the increased percentage of non-payment or delinquencies, especially from where you were at before March when we started going into this order to where we are now inside this quarantine, inside the response, the stay-at-home order, how we're seeing those non-payment delinquencies. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get a good feel for where services may be needed. And we'll have a poll question around this here in just a few minutes. But then they're starting to think about how they're going to start doing their field work, getting back out into the utilities, start helping utilities out, start doing sanitary surveys again, and then working with entities as they start building their startup program and start getting some buildings that have been sitting without a lot of use lately, but starting to help them work through that process. So we'll have some update or some information to share there too. DEQ has posted on their webpage some guidance around bulk milk disposal for our sanitary folks. And they have a forward-facing page now for COVID-19 updates. That's everything that's environmental quality related. So they wanted to make sure we put that out to you, that you guys know you can go there and check their webpage. And then, of course, they have some information from their memo about how they're trying to work with the different wastewater entities as far as not trying to inundate them with people in the buildings and so forth, but there is a policy out there, a process out there for them to help you get through this time. Then our next update is going to be from DPOR. Get that slide to come up. So from DPOR, we had a couple questions about the CEU requirements for coming up in February 2021. The guidance we've received back from DPOR at this time is that the CEU deadline for water operators is not currently extended past February 2021. Obviously, they'll be looking at that throughout this, depending on how far this goes and what the next round is. But what they're saying right now is there's enough opportunity, they feel, for folks to get the CEUs they need to close out that February 2021 timeframe. Our webinars alone can get you up to 50% of your CEUs that you'll need for February. So if you have people that need the CEUs, if we can get them on here, get their names listed so that Geneva and her staff can capture that and make sure we have what we need. And then there's additional trainings. Geneva, we talked about this earlier. Did you want to put out the ones we talked about? I believe we talked about rural water, water jam, and there was a third one that we discussed.
Yeah, so there'll be other opportunities that we are aware of coming up. Rural Waters Conference is still scheduled for July, and we'd just like to share with everybody that if they are in need of credits, that'll be a great opportunity in which they can go and get some water operator credits at the Rural Water Conference. Water Jam in September is still on track and scheduled. Everything is moving as it has originally planned. Obviously, with every event, we'll keep an eye on things, but we have every intention to provide as many CPE and CEU credits as possible through that avenue. And then in October, there'll be a plant operators conference, which will provide water and wastewater, or excuse me, water and engineering. That does not have any wastewater credits on it, but I do know that VWEA is running several wastewater operator series webinars. So if you have not availed yourself of that, you're welcome to go to VWEA's website, and they have webinars that they are scheduling and delivering. So while the CPE deadline has not been extended, providers are doing our very best to give opportunities to water and wastewater operators to still get those credits in through social and physical distancing and using some other avenues. So please don't be panicked just yet. We'll do our best to get you the credits that you need. And again, this webinar in particular does get approved for credits, and you can use it for up to 50% of the total amount of credits you submit.
Geneva, we have one question already. The question is, if I have more than one operator watching webinars, can they also get credit for watching? So I think what they're trying to say is
get some clarification
more than one person
for that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did have a situation where some operators were viewing at the same computer. And so what we have been told through DPOR, and this was just in the last week, thank you for making that, thanks for bringing up the question so we could clarify. If you will email a list, the supervisor needs to basically create an attendance list and have the operator sign that said they attended through one terminal. So you've got one computer connected, but you have multiple people in the room. You can submit that to Scott Smith. His email address is at the very end where we do the operator credit page. You can submit a scanned copy of your roster that was in the room to Scott, and he can provide credits for both operators. Now, we are still encouraging that you don't put a large number of operators in one room, and you keep the separation between the operators, and you do all of those things that we should be doing. But if you do have more than one operator viewing from one computer, we can give you credit for all the operators that viewed the webinar. Perfect. I hope that was clear enough. And great, Barry Matthews also mentioned, I noticed that the Virginia Tech broadcast series is also taking place. So go to the Virginia Tech website, and I know you can get there through the VDH Office of Drinking Water page, both of which are listed on the Warren website. So do please go avail yourself. There is a lot of opportunities. I know there's a lot of companies, consulting companies, service providers, manufacturers that are creating webinars for this purpose in particular. So if you need to find them, send me an email and I can definitely direct you in the right location.
Perfect. And I believe for those of you that were on last week, Barry, if you're able to speak, if you could go ahead and weigh in on this too. But as of right now, the Virginia Tech Short School is still scheduled to happen, and that's 1 week of water operator and 1 week of wastewater operator. Is that correct, Barry?
Hopefully you can hear me better now. But yes, that's correct. And we're still looking at August to conduct the short school, although there may be a modified venue and modified approach to delivering the short school information. So Virginia Tech is looking into that currently, and we'll let everyone know as soon as we know, or make sure that Virginia Tech reaches out to everyone and possibly through the VA Warren meetings as well.
Perfect. So we just wanted to make sure everybody had as much information as we can get you to make sure that we still meet our CEU requirements for February, because I'll just reiterate one more time. As of right now, DPOR's guidance from their directorate is that you still have to meet those requirements by February 2021. They haven't extended anything there yet. So just make sure we get all those listings out so everybody can have those. All right, I believe we're ready for the next slide. So one of the questions that we've gotten a couple of times, we're on this slide here for the VDH map. This total cases 26,746. Those aren't necessarily all active cases right now. That is from the life cycle of this event in Virginia. Some of those people have, I think it's roughly 3,500 of those the Fusion Center has reported have recovered and returned back to level of normality, whether it's back to work or going back on their stay-at-home order. Throughout the entirety of the event, we've had roughly 3,500 people that have had to be hospitalized. That's not how many people are necessarily in the hospital right now for it. And I think that's important to point out, just so we have it for planning information, that we're not looking at, hey, we have 26,000 people reporting right now as being positive. But we do need to keep in mind that the average growth rate inside Virginia right now, the last estimate I heard, is between 4 and 6%. But we're starting to see that plateau out, and we're starting to come down on the backside of the bell curve. So hopefully these numbers we start seeing a better, here we go. So on our next slide here, we kind of talk about that. But we have the request, and we're sending an email up to VDH to see if they can give us this is our running total, and this is what we have active right now. So here's our number of cases by event date. So you can see how it kind of peaks and falls, and we're starting to come back down on the backside there as of May 11th. Does anybody want to weigh in on this? Everybody feel comfortable with what we just said? Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. So to get on to our special guests, we've these three folks have accepted our request to talk a little bit about what they're doing in their programs around COVID and some of the things they've been seeing and how they're handling it. So we've got Sharon Foley, the Executive Director of Harrisonburg-Rockingham County Regional Sewer Authority, Brian Key, the Executive Director for Bedford Water Authority, Russ Navartel, the Division Director for the Henrico County Water Treatment. And so we're going to start off with Sharon. Sharon, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
Saying thank you to the Warren team for inviting me to speak today and for hosting these weekly conference calls. The calls have been invaluable to us in helping shape our COVID response plan in order to maintain continuity of our operations as well as the safety of our employees. And I also want to say thank you so much for the FEMA masks, which Warren sent out last week. We got them and have distributed them to our staff. We call them the tidy whitey masks. When Ike called me last week, he asked if I could spend a few minutes talking about HRSA's experience with the COVID-19 crisis in our role as a regional wastewater treatment utility, and to speak to any issues we have encountered through our pre-treatment program. So I want to begin by just sharing just a few bits of information about HRSA. For those of you that don't know us, we are located in the central Shenandoah Valley and provide wholesale wastewater treatment services to 5 localities, the city of Harrisonburg, Rockingham County, and the towns of Bridgewater, Dayton, and Mount Crawford. We own and operate the North River Wastewater Treatment Facility, which is an enhanced nutrient removal plant with a design capacity of 22 million gallons per day. And we currently treat average daily flows of between 13 to 14 million gallons per day. And our operations are 24/7. To date, HRSA has implemented most of the strategies that have been described by other utilities on these calls. We have most immediately, when the pandemic started, we restricted access to our facility by the public and discontinued all non-essential travel and training by staff. In early April, we split our maintenance and laboratory departments into 2 teams. One team working 12-hour days Monday through Wednesday, and the second working Thursday through Saturdays. We have placed occupancy restrictions on common spaces like break rooms and the operators' offices. And we have also instituted a policy of 1 HRSA employee per vehicle. Our shift operators that generally work 4 days a month with the daylight crew have been asked to work from home on training assignments for their CPE licensing. We've been able to use online training, safety training, and we also developed training modules with one of our consultants that on activated sludge treatment and secondary clarifiers. So all the measures that we have put in place have seem to be very effective in the short term, but currently the management team is looking into developing a longer term strategy that is more sustainable from a human resource perspective. The 12-hour work days and weekend works are not particularly popular, and so we're looking at options, how we can run the marathon on this pandemic and not break the staff. So we're looking at a plan that would bring the two teams back together, which would involve staggered start times, breaks, lunches, and perhaps the mandatory use of face masks, which are currently optional at this time. So moving on to pretreatment, approximately 40% of the flow that the North River facility treats is actually industrial wastewater from several large food processors, which are significant users of our system. These plants include poultry slaughter, further poultry processing, dairy, and non-edible or edible rendering facilities. All of these plants are required to operate pretreatment facilities before discharging into our wastewater system. So throughout, since the start of the pandemic, we have continued to operate a fairly robust pretreatment surveillance program. We have found that when we back off on our surveillance, we can experience slug loadings from these industries. And so our presence out in the field conducting monitoring and surveillance is really a good way to mitigate those slug loadings. If those plants know we're watching, they're less inclined to discharge things that don't meet our local limits. So that's been an important, continuing that program has been very important to us for operational reasons. In terms of restrictions by the plants, access to their facilities by our employees, we haven't run into any difficulties there. However, one of our poultry processors has asked that we monitor the temperature of our employees prior to them accessing their facility, which we've been doing. So since the pandemic started, the volume of wastewater flow we have treated has really not dropped off all that much. And we think that's due because of the fact that the food processing plants in our area have been operating at capacity. From the map earlier, you can see that the Harrisonburg area actually has a very high per capita COVID-19 infection rate for the state. And this may be due to the large number of essential workers that are employed by the food processing facilities in our area. And those workers have not had the luxury to be able to work from home like some of us have. And I would characterize our flows as being similar to what we experience in the summer months when our university, the James Madison University, is not in session. So pivoting to two topics that I ask about while I'm thinking about JMU, let's talk about beer. The COVID-19 crisis has created a bit of a waste beer problem that has arisen with some of the craft breweries due to an abrupt demand that some have speculated was due to the lack of a spring break and the end of year graduation keg parties that won't happen this year. The issue was actually first brought to the attention of VAMWA in early April by the Virginia Craft Brewers Guild. And at the time, it was estimated that as much as 150,000 gallons of beer statewide would need to be sewered, which led to a concern that it could overwhelm the smaller wastewater treatment facilities. In our case, HRSA already had a pretreatment provisions in place for disposal of this type of waste. So we were not too concerned about the volume, but we did reach out to the 4 small breweries that are users of our system and provided them with guidance on the best practice to dispose of the beer, which involved slowly sewering the waste product over a period of days. For us, that we didn't see any impact from that. The other issue that has come up deals with another beverage, not raw milk. A few weeks ago, we received a general inquiry about whether HRSA would be able to accept raw milk for digestion in our anaerobic digester. And that question prompted a review of whether we could do it and what the impacts would be. And so apparently, even though there may be shortages of milk products in the grocery store, there is a large surplus of milk products in the institutional market. And the processing plants that serve the food service market, like your restaurants, schools, and universities, sell their products in much larger containers and have not been able to quickly pivot to the smaller containers sold in grocery stores. And of course, you just can't stop milking cows to shut off the source. Hence, there's a need for raw milk disposal, not only in Virginia, but across the country. So we looked into this, and I want to emphasize that we have not fielded any direct requests for this, nor is this a waste product we would want to treat through co-digestion, but it is something that could be done. But if you are asked to do it, I would highly recommend that you look into what treatment methods you would need to use. Raw milk is very high in BOD. It's high in volatile solids and total solids, plus it's cold. So that's something that if you introduce into your digesters would need to be pursued very cautiously to not upset your existing processes. So that concludes my remarks for today. Again, I want to thank Warren for the opportunity to speak with everyone today, and be happy if you'd like to chat or send me any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Sharon, that's great information. I appreciate the part about where you're talking about you're pacing this as a marathon, and you're starting to look at those long work hours and how that's starting to have a toll on your employees also. I would imagine many of our folks listening in are probably starting to see that too, where they're starting to exhaust their employees out a little bit, either mentally or emotionally, not just physically. So that's good information, and especially about the milk. It's very timely that DEQ hung their bulk milk guidance just this morning. So I appreciate it. I'm sure we're gonna have questions as we go along. So if you can stay with us, we'll push those questions to you. Our next speaker is going to be Brian Key, the Executive Director with Bedford Water Authority. Brian, are you ready?
I am, yes, sir. So I'm honored to be part.
Brian.
I'm also honored to be part of the webinar and echo Sharon's appreciation for Warren hosting these webinars. It's a great source of information where you can get a lot of information in a short period of time. So thank you for that. So for me, I look at it as day 62 since the governor announced the state of emergency, which was March 12th. You know, counting it by the days makes it seem like it's shorter than it's felt like for us. So I imagine a number of you are kind of in the same boat. It doesn't feel like it's only been 2 months. It feels like longer. Starting out a little quick bit about Bedford Water. We're a small utility with a little less than 14,000 customers. Our budget's about $17 million a year. We've got about 80 employees. About 3/4 of our employees are water operators, wastewater operators, and maintenance personnel. So that only leaves about 1/4 of the company that make up the administration with customer service, engineering, finance, and our support staff. So that plays into a little bit about some of the actions that we took through dealing with this pandemic. First of all, the communications, I think, is one important thing to point out that we've been trying to perform as much as possible. Starting early on in the process on March 12th, we started sending out a lot of email messages to our employees, at least a couple coronavirus-based emails per week, trying to keep our employees informed on what was going on in the world around us, not just how it was impacting the authority at that time. We've since backed those off to about once a week, but we're still regularly communicating with our employees. And we've really gotten a lot of good positive response from that. They like that we're keeping them informed. They like that we provide them information about, how the numbers are looking in our area and in the state. And also, how it's impacting them, what the authority's having to change in order to continue to provide our service and protect our employees. There's a webinar next week from the Women in Public Finance that's titled Executive Presence in a Time of Crisis. And I think that confirms that there's a fair amount of importance placed from staff on the leadership needs to be engaged and help to ease people's concerns and help to provide information. So we've been trying to take that to heart and take that approach. We've done a few things with communicating through policies, like we've drafted a pandemic plan and a teleworking policy so that not only for this crisis, but any in the future, we'll be prepared and people won't have to wait for us to give them the guidance as we're developing it. We'll have it readily available for the next time. I hope there's not a next time, but chances are in the history of things, probably there will be. We've also stepped up our emergency planning a little bit. We quickly evaluated all of our treatment sources and tried to figure out how we could shut down any one of the treatment sources and provide the service to our customers through the others, the remaining sources, just in case we ended up with a large number of staff that weren't able to report to work and that we needed to have the few that were still on staff able to provide the services necessary for our customers. So part of that also included testing of a new booster station that allows us to use any one of the three sources to provide service to the three different service areas. And that testing has gone very well. And luckily we have the capability of using one of the three sources at any time. So a little bit about our technology. I think that's really helped us to get through this crisis. We started moving people home as much as possible on March 16th. We then closed our office on March 17th, and we gave all of our employees a few hours of extra pay. We used PTO, paid time off. So we gave everybody 40 hours there because there were so many things that were changing all at once. We had a number of employees that were feeling a little overwhelmed on how they were going to take care of their kids now that school's closed, or what happens if they had, a loved one that needed to be taken care of. So we did that prior to the federal's decision to expand the FMLA process. And I think that has helped our employees weather the storm a little bit. All of our employees are pretty technologically savvy. They all have computers or desktop, whether that's desktops or laptops or tablets. We expect all of our employees to communicate by email, so they're already used to using Outlook. We had VPN in place, which only a handful of our leadership staff, the managers and supervisors and directors were using. And we've expanded that so that now all of our staff have the ability to use that if they need to. So we had to install VPN client on a few computers, but that was about it to allow people to access our network while working remotely. We've greatly stepped up our video conferencing capability. We had Teams, Microsoft Teams before, and we used that for instant messaging primarily, but we now have regular meetings with a large number of our staff through Teams using video conferencing, and that's worked really well. When people are home, they're typing IMs to the folks that are here in the office, but mostly I think people want to see faces. They want to see their coworkers, and being able to do that through Teams without having to schedule a meeting or set up something like through WebEx has worked really well. We've also gotten pretty good at hosting meetings through Zoom and WebEx to try to keep people able to have group meetings without having to see each other within that 6-foot space of personal distance, social distancing. Our customer service team, when we closed the office, we still are providing the service to our customers, and some people are doing that from home. We're able to do that because we have a voice over IP phone system. So they can use their computer as if it's a telephone, as if they were sitting here in the office. Unfortunately, all of our employees that are in the customer service department don't have internet access at home. That's been one of the challenges that we've found is Bedford County doesn't have internet access throughout the county. It's a pretty rural community. We're about halfway in between Lynchburg and Roanoke, and being a rural mountainous area, it's hard to get internet for everyone. So when you don't have internet at home, it makes it really hard to access the network. It's impossible to use our phone system or to use the computers to do the work that you're used to doing when you're in the office. So that's been a bit of a challenge for us. And we've got a large portion of our employees that can't work from home. I mentioned earlier, 3/4 of our staff are maintenance and operators. They still have to be on site to make the repairs. They still have to be on site to run the plants. Even though they're fairly highly automated plants, you still have to be there to run the benchtop tests and do the visuals. So it's been a little tricky trying to make sure that everybody had as much spacing, as much safety as possible. And we've done that by moving people inside the plant to remote locations, spreading them out as far as possible. Sometimes using a maintenance building that's normally full of lawnmowers, we've put a person there instead. Some people are operating, in the remote sites that were treatment plants that were normally staffed. We've moved some of our maintenance employees to one of the treatment plants that has enough space and enough internet access that they could work out of that plant instead of starting from our central office location where they were used to working. So it took a little bit of creativity to get people as much of that spacing, as much of the social distancing as possible, instead of having everybody in a cube that's sitting right next to each other. So really what our challenge has been is just this constant learning process. It's a blessing and a curse to have so much information available to you. It's great to know what's going on around you and look at all the data, but it also is overwhelming. So many different sources that you can go to get data, so many places that can portray the numbers in a terrible way, or they can show that things are actually improving or things are better than people think. So digesting all that's been challenging. And I think the assistance that we've gotten through a number of groups for summarizing this data, like this Virginia Warren webinar, we've been trying to focus in on those groups that gather it together and share what they're seeing. So, a lot of web meetings, like Bedford County, the local government has a weekly staff meeting. We're participating with those 9 a.m. on Monday every week. We've been doing the Virginia Warren meetings Wednesday at 1 o'clock every week. Chamber of Commerce is a great way to find out what the businesses in the area are seeing in the industries and getting a little better feel for how that might impact our revenues. So we've been joining a Friday webinar 9:45 to watch how the businesses are reacting to the COVID-19. And there's a great government presentation. The Virginia Local Government and Public School Divisions have advisory sessions on Wednesday at 11 a.m. That's been a great source of information. So just trying to digest as much of that as possible and using that to formulate your plans forward, I think has been challenging, but also amazing how much information you can get with just a few clicks on the internet. So the last thing that I want to talk about is our reopening plan. And we just established this. We're trying to follow all the guidance that the state and the federal entities are providing. We took a little more conservative approach, making sure that our employees felt safe. We wanted to focus our plan on just reopening issues, not about what benefits we have, not about quarantine issues or travel, vacation options, but mostly just a 2-page document that was short and sweet and easy to read and understood when we were going to open each portion of our operations. So for us, phase 1 was bringing some employees back to work and getting them here in the office instead of remote teleworking. That takes place for us on May 18th, and that's kind of closely following the executive order number 53 that is for the non-essential businesses being able to open. So in that plan, we have to implement some procedures to keep employees safe, like talking about masks, talking about social distancing, and making sure that we have as much safety as possible for the employees that are coming back. We're still allowing some people to work from home too, particularly the ones that have shown a good work ethic. They've shown high performance. We're still allowing them to stay home. We're not bringing everybody back on May 18th. And our phase 2 of the plan is opening the front desk and letting customers back into the building and visitors back in the building. We've scheduled that for June 15th. That's somewhat following the Executive Order 55, which is kind of the stay-at-home order. And at that time, we'll have limitations on the visitors, like 3 at our front desk at a time, and having those employees that have, again, continued to show the productivity who can work from home. We're still going to encourage them to do that, but it's hard to do that if you've got customers at the front desk. You can't telework and address their needs or take their payments as they're walking in the door. So we will have like our customer service team back at work, all of them by June 15th. And then our phase 3 is July 6th, and that is where it's the new normal business. I'm not going to say it's business as usual, because I don't think we're going to fall back to where we were before. I think we're going to have some employees that can work home at least more often, if not a few that could work from home all the time. Again, we've seen a lot of high productivity that we didn't really expect from having people able to have a little bit better flexible schedules and being able to work from their house, or at least start the day at their house. And we'll probably change the way we do meetings using some of this new technology that we've got available now. So those are a few of the changes that we've made. There's a lot more of little small things behind the scenes, but hopefully that gives you a little picture of how a small utility in rural Virginia is trying to take care of our employees and still service all of our customers.
Perfect, Brian. Thank you. So I like the point you made out, that the norm is not going to be the norm as we knew it prior to March. The norm's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have to adjust to it. Using all the lessons learned throughout these 61 days that we've been on this stay-at-home order, and applying it to our new ERPs, our new COOPs, everything like that. That's important to have. I also like the fact that you were talking about you're listening in on the Chamber of Commerce meetings. That's probably also a good pathway for the utilities to enlighten the businesses as they're trying to come back up, what it's going to take, and some of the flushing and other things that'll need to happen in order to help them meet that. So those is really good information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next we have, thanks, sir. Next we have Russ Navratil with the Division Director for Henrico County Water Treatment. Russ, are you ready?
Thanks, Ike, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Going to go a little bit different directions in some of these, and a lot of things that has been done at Harrisonburg and Bedford is the same things that we've done at Henrico. One of the other things that we have in Henrico is we are also the solid waste pickup. We provide that pickup service for some of the residents, and we also have 2 public use areas for dropping off your trash and your yard waste and things like that. And those were had to remain open during this whole event so far. So there were lots of changes that had to take place to keep either restrict the number of vehicles that were going in at a time. They did change some of the hours of operations, of course, lowered the hours that they were open. But the bigger impacts is the number of vehicles that could get in. So you had long lines at these events. So you also at times were involving the police to keep peace in those lines. I'll just say it that way. You also had to make changes on payments. Since you close your offices, you close your cashiers, you're no longer accepting payments at your offices. A lot of people are making their payments in person, so not going online and paying those added fees. Well, we've waived the fees for the customers in paying those bills. At a treatment plant, there's not many things you can do. You still have to operate that plant 24/7. Your operators still have to be there to perform the tests. The only things that you can really adjust is what are you doing with your office staff, or and your maintenance staff. And in our case, we split our maintenance. Excuse me a minute. And a phone ringing in the background. We split our maintenance staff up in half and had them work performing things like training and rewriting SOPs and things like that at home as much as they could telecommute while the other crew was in, and then flip that the next week. Run into some of the same problems that you run into in rural communities, even though we're a large county and internet coverage is very good in Henrico, but not all the employees live within that county. I'm one of them. I'm 40 miles from the plant. I am down the street from Ike, and our internet coverage is fair. So how do you work through that and work from home? Those challenges have been things that we've had to work through. Some of the other things that the county has done is they've offered testing for COVID to the employees, mostly what we call the frontline employees, those who have dealt with customer service face-to-face with the general population, police, fire, those type folks were all first offered testing, and then later on the employees were offered to be tested. The other things that we also looked at is obviously like closing the engineering, keep minimum staff in the office. Typically there's like 2 people in the engineering staff. The director and the assistant director are not in the offices at the same time. You're keeping people separated in case somebody gets infected. One thing that we have not experienced, which was very good, is that we have not seen any changes in the ability to get any of the treatment chemicals we need to run the plants. We operate a water plant and a wastewater plant. The only things that have changed there is how you handle that paperwork. A lot of them don't want to hand paperwork back and forth between the driver and the employee. So we've had to make some minor changes to our procedures on making sure that we get the paperwork for that. As we start coming out of this, we are also looking at how do we bring those who are telecommuting back into the offices and back into the workspaces, and do that and keep some sort of separation between all of the different staff that you're bringing in. It's a little bit different at a plant than it is in an office environment, and we have to look at that in all of those aspects. Let's see.
Russ, one question
Yes.
that's come in through the chat is, have you all seen any change in water demand?
We haven't seen a real change in water demand. We had actually demand started going up and then it went back down to where it normally was. So we're in about a normal pattern right now. As the weather gets warmer, we expect the demand to go up because we expect sprinkler systems to start coming on.
And this might be a question for all 3 of you, but somebody's asking, what have you done dealing around the septic haulers themselves? Because you had started talking about you don't want to pass paperwork back and forth on your deliveries. Are any of the three of you doing anything unique around septic haulers? We'll start with you.
That one I don't know. I mean, that's handled by our wastewater division. I have not heard that we've made any changes or had any issues.
Yeah.
At HRSA, we are continuing to receive septage, actually. But what we are doing is we actually, a lot of the septic haulers use our restroom facilities, and so we have started renting porta potties so that they can use those facilities when they're unloading the trucks. We had a project actually under design to modernize and automate our receiving facility so we don't have to exchange papers. But that project the contractor was awarded last week. So we're not currently at that point, but we hope to be there by the end of the summer where we won't have to have staff, interfacing with the haulers.
Okay, perfect. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Russ. Did you have some more information to share with us?
No, I did not.
Okay. So I want to thank all three. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Somebody's going to speak. All right. So I want to thank all three of you for joining us today. If you can hang on, we'll continue on with what we're doing. One thing that I'd like what Russ was saying is they're trying to keep their directors and their assistant directors from being in at the same time, trying to protect that hierarchy, those decision makers, those ones that may have to do that emergency purchasing stuff. They're trying to do what they can to keep that separated, to keep it moving forward. So these are great best practices that maybe if we're not implementing those out of our own utilities, maybe these are some things we can grab. So we've got some great information from Sharon, Brian, and Russ, all three of you. I really do appreciate you guys being on and sharing your information with us. So we have a question that we want to post here. This is about non-payment and delinquencies. And it kind of ties into what our three panelists were talking about as far as billing goes. But this goes back kind of to ODW and DEQ's also looking for some similar information. But prior to March, approximately how much has your non-payment delinquent accounts increased since early March? So since we moved into COVID, what is that percentage of increase you're seeing in delinquent payments? And then we're giving you 5 hard answers and then a 6 answer if it's greater than 25. So our 5 answers, our first one is 5%, 10%, 15%, a 20% change, a 25% change, and then greater than 25. And then if it doesn't apply to you, if you can mark that. Please remember, by partaking in the polls, it helps us get you your CEUs that you need. Let's see. Oops. So I'll give you the answers quick. So we have our answers back. 12% of the folks on the live version have said 5% increase. 9% of our folks are saying they're seeing a 10% increase in delinquent payments. 6% of the folks are saying they're seeing around a 15%. No one is seeing anything around that 20% delinquent rate. We've got 1% around the 25% delinquency rate. 6% of you are reporting that you're having greater than 5% delinquency increase. And then 67% says it does not apply to you. And Michael, if you just want to put your answer into the chat, I know it's not the grooviest way to do it because you're no longer anonymous, but we'll grab what you had to say there too. One of the questions we're having, are utilities moving forward with capital improvement projects, infrastructure upgrades, etc.? So for those of you, those panelists that are on today, are any of you moving forward with capital improvement projects?
This is Sharon. I was just getting ready to respond to the question from Glenn. We are, and actually our project, our capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2021 was approved last week, and we will be getting ready to bid a fairly large project next week.
Okay. Scott, I know Scott's talked on this before. Do you want to weigh in on capital improvement? What you guys are doing around capital improvement projects right now?
Sure. We're continuing on with projects that were underway. At this point, we've not seen dramatic revenue hits, probably in the magnitude of 4 or 5%, and so it has influenced our look forward for the next budget year. But our board made a commitment. The thought was twofold from our board, that we have a role in helping the local economy recover. And so the other side of that, where these are needed improvements, and the hope is that we'll find favorable bid environments moving forward. Oftentimes that's the case on a downturn that we've all kind of experienced. You get into those phases and perhaps you get better bid pricing than you would otherwise. And so we don't want to miss that opportunity. So we're trying to maintain our capital program as planned.
Gotcha. Russ or Brian, did you want to weigh in at all on what Bedford and Henrico are doing around capital improvement?
This is Brian. I'll say Bedford Water, we've put most of our projects on hold. Our board's a little bit concerned about how much of an impact it's going to have on our revenue. We just don't have enough data yet to know what our long-term impact is going to be. So for the time being, they've asked us to hold back, and then hoping that we can release them, later in the summer or early fall.
Gotcha. It looks like Louisa's doing the same thing. They're placing all their CI projects on hold until the cost of the COVID impact has been determined. Russ, is Henrico moving forward with new capital improvement projects, or just closing out the ones that you had from 2020, or are you guys taking new bids on new things?
A little of everything. We've had to go back and relook at our CIP for our next year's budget to revamp it based on the new requirements for where our budget levels had to be. We had to take our budgets back to where we are currently at this year. So that has had an impact on some of our CIP projects that we're planned for next year. Some of our current projects that were ready to go to construction have been delayed, but they are still planned on being done because we bid them and have a contract in place. We just delayed the start dates on those.
Gotcha. All right, that was good information. Geneva, I'm going to start reading this next slide, but can you post the new poll question, the one that we were talking about earlier about vacation, the policies around vacation taken? So our next poll question is about vacation requests. Has your company modified or changed its vacation policy for employees, especially around this the COVID response? Scott, did you want to speak to what we were talking about earlier about how you guys are looking at those inundated areas, what that may lead to?
Sure. Like most utilities, we entered into a phase where we prohibited travel. I think there's been a lot of discussions, Brian, a lot of our panelists hit on it, about the next phase planning for utilities, because we're not coming out of this quickly. And so in our case, we're going to be releasing to our employees a new modified vacation policy. And the goal of that policy is to get employees thinking in advance during their vacation planning of where they will go to mitigate risk. And so you tune in next week. That's something that we're going to share and talk a little bit further about.
Perfect. Okay. So the poll question's up, and your 3 response answers are yes, no, I don't know. And the question again, for those that are on the YouTube viewing, is has your company modified, changed its vacation policy for employees? And our answers back are 28% of you online are saying yes. 60% are saying no, there hasn't been any change or modification yet. 11% are saying they do not know if their company has started to modify or change these vacation policies. And this is the reason we brought this up, like Scott was talking about, is if you go to one of these inundated areas or your employees travel to one of these higher risk areas, you know, they take their time off to go, are we then having to make sure we make accommodations for them to quarantine for additional time when they get back? What is that doing for our workforce? So, okay. So our best business practices, we talked a little bit about this. Brian really hit on it about the phased approach to getting back into normal operations. How we're matching our approach with the state government's phase levels. And we're going to try and have ODW on next week to talk a little bit about what they're looking for from the water side. And we'll reach out to DEQ also. But then consider your own operations before opening to the public. What are we doing internally to be ready before we reach out and start doing things with the public? And then we just kind of talked about this managing vacation requests. And then what are the public perceptions as we start this process? Okay. All right. We have our supply updates. As of thus far, we've not really had any real major requests from the Warren for supplies. Everything has been about information and cross-leveling of information across the industries, both water and wastewater. And from what I was reading in the chat, you guys are sharing a lot of good information with your colleagues, and this is a really good platform. Geneva, do we want to post the face mask question? I know we're pushing right against our timeline. I think we're about a minute over, folks, so if you bear with us. So the face mask poll question: has your utility requested and or received face masks provided by FEMA EPA through the Virginia WARN program? And your answers are: have been requested but not yet received, have been requested and received, we don't know if they've been requested yet, and does not apply. Those are your four responses there.
And just for those, since we're on this one in particular, I'm going to go back to our Warren slide. There is a link to the form. So of the 148 utilities that did request, 99% of them have been supplied and sent out. There's just a few last remaining items that I have to get from some utilities, some missing information for our documentation. We're going to try and complete that today. But then from this point forward, anyone that has not yet should be filling in this form in order to get their masks. So the link will be in our website as well as right here on this page.
And I see that in the chat. And I see that in the chat box. We're having some discussion around the vacation time, allowing some of it to roll over to 2021. So our poll results, 15% say that it has been requested but not yet received. You're still waiting on them. 37% say they have been requested and received. That's good to know. 17% don't know if they've been requested yet. If you're not sure, definitely get in contact with Geneva through that link that she just showed.
Geneva will be using this information to double check, and I'll be checking that out on your behalf, so no worries there.
Yep. And then 31% does not apply. Geneva, how many masks have you gotten out so far?
We have shipped just under 40,000 masks in the last literally 8 days. We processed that many masks, so over 7,943 operators and employees in the water and wastewater industry now have masks. So it's an amazing and a staggering number all at the same time. But there are still more masks available, so don't hesitate. If you need masks, if you have not already received them, put in your request because we still have more available.
Gotcha. We have one question in the question and answer section. It says, what % of listeners are disconnecting delinquent customers?
And I guess to answer that, if you would put it in the chat, I would ask that you just change to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can get the knowledge that you provide from your utility. So if you do have an update to put in, just put it in chat, change your audience to be all attendees as well, and you all can answer that directly.
And what's our next slide after supply updates?
Going into why you should join the Warren.
All right, Mike, are you on?
Yes, I am.
This is your slide, buddy.
Okay, as most of you all can read the slides and see, one of the biggest benefits of joining Warren is you have resources around the state if you have an emergency. We've never had to respond with physical people around the state, but we have had requests for leak location, for specialized material. There's not many yards that have 14-inch ductile iron pipe stored on them just because of the limited use of that pipe. But one utility needed 100 feet of it, and we were able to provide them with that, plus the fittings to adapt the pipe. Again, another reason for joining Warren is you're going to meet one of the requirements of the OEA guidelines if your utility has 3,300 or more people that they serve. There's no cost to be a member. In the past, we've had people say, well, our lawyers won't let us join. That's a misnomer because that locality's fire department, police departments already have mutual aid agreements. So if anybody has any questions about Warren, they want to talk further, they can catch my information at the end of the program. And Ike or I will be more than glad to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Back to our
Geneva,
sponsors.
do you want to Geneva, do you want to post your CEU poll question now?
Sure. So now that we're getting to the conclusion, if you're here in order to get operator wastewater or wastewater, as well as engineering credits, we do need you to answer this question more than any other. This collects the email address and the name that you signed into the webinar with, and that's how we can assign you credits. We've talked about it a lot at the very beginning, but this is an easy hours worth of credits that you can get. And if you know of operators that are in need of credits or engineers in need of credits, please share with them the information for next week. We are currently stating that you need to watch the live version in order to get these credits, because some of the requirements from DPOR is that you have the ability to interact and ask questions. And that's only available through the live. We don't have ability to ask questions through the recorded version. So just be on and watch the live version and we can get you some credits, no cost. So I think we've captured everybody that needs it. I'm going to go ahead and share the results just to give you an idea. We've got 38% needing the water operator credits, 26 are wastewater, 33 engineering, and then 18 do not need credits at all, but thank you for letting us know.
All right. Okay. I appreciate everybody being on. We have our last two slides, which is our contact information. Really good discussion going on about not disconnecting. I think maybe we'll look at turning that into a poll question next week as we have ODW on also. At what point are you going to start reminding those customers that they do have to start paying their bills? But that can turn into a very lively discussion right now. So we're going to probably table that one to next week. Our contact information is up right now. If you have any follow-on questions or any additional information to share, please contact either myself or Mike Lynn, the current chairs, or Scott Shirley, the chair-elect. He'll be taking over here next year. And I really, really want to thank all of our guests that were on today. You guys shared a wealth of great information and knowledge for everyone. Barry, do you have any comments? I kind of only had you speak in there one time on a couple things about CEUs, and then I'm going to ask Sharon and Brian and Russ.
Wait until next week and let Dwayne give his information next week.
Okay. Sharon, did you have anything you want to, for the good of the group before we exit?
No, thank you again for inviting me to speak today. And I want to express my thanks to Warren for all the resources you provided us to manage our this crisis.
Thank you, ma'am. Brian, do you have anything?
Great information. I appreciate the ability to be part of it.
Thank you, sir. Russ?
Nothing else to add except thank you. This has been a great program that you guys are putting on.
Thank you. And then I'll just, anybody else, Mike, Scott, Geneva, anything else you want to put out before we close?
I'll just share to go ahead and go back to the website, vawarn.org. You'll see the recorded version of today's presentation and all the information and resources we have there. We are still updating them as we get new information, such as the DEQ website went up just today, and anything else that we come across. We are going to keep that site live and active with new links and new information. So don't hesitate to go back and check it out frequently.
I have one quick question for you, Geneva. If the night crew watches the recorded version of the webinar, can they also get CPE credit?
At this point, we're not able to give recorded versions credits, but we're going to work on trying to find a solution for that. So I would say at this moment, no. But if that changes, we will let everyone know via the webinars and then also post it on our website.
And I know a lot of people jumped off, so maybe we can include that next week on the slide about where that sits right now. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.